Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 7th of March 2024. I've just done this video, 45 minutes is a massive one. This is a big video I'm going to do. I'm going to try and make it quicker because that one was too long. And the mic didn't work. 45 minutes of recording, I've got to say exactly the same thing right over again. Okay, we'll go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. Some really big figures. Russians have lost an awful lot. In fact, Dell, who does the stats presentation in the OneDrive shared link in the description to the video below, said to me this morning, two stats worthy of note since the beginning of the war: new record highs for the 7th day rolling, averages on artillery 41 a day and vehicles and fuel tanks 51 a day. So the rolling averages that you can see from the loss of artillery is at the highest it's ever been. Here you can see the green line is the 7-day rolling average right up there for that, and for vehicles and fuel tanks, that's artillery, it's likewise at the highest it has been. You can see that this is the counter-offensive period where the Ukrainians sat back a little bit after Malatok-Kamachka and losing their equipment. They then battered the Russian logistics and artillery to create some huge Russian losses, and then it's going to step back a little bit due to probably ammunition, lack of ammunition. And then it's stepping up again. I think, having said that, there's a lot to be said about the drones and how they are taking out equipment. Anyway, let's go back to those stats and see what they say. So 17 tanks, 51 APVs and 42 artillery systems, huge. One multiple launch rocket system, 53 vehicles and fuel tanks is massive. 5 pieces of special equipment. I have seen so much footage the last couple of days. Just montages of like, here's 10 hits on different vehicles, trucks driving along this particular road. Bang, 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 bang. They're all being hit. That's just stuff getting blown up, destroyed, damaged, and whatnot. Let's see if we can justify these general staff figures. And actually, I was challenged on these yesterday. All these figures were challenged, and I'll talk about that in a second. Right. If we go to Andrew Perpetua's loss statistics that he compiles from checking out the socials on a daily basis, and he says below this, he says, by the way, there are 8 Russian vehicles that can be added to this list that I haven't added because there are no public links for them. He's obviously been sent them privately and they're not allowed to be publicized, those hits yet. But 8 more destroyed vehicles you can add to that, which makes it even worse because at the moment that ratio, and we need to look at the ratios to get a sense of whether Ukraine will prevail. They need I reckon, a 3-to-1 plus ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses. Here we've got a 6-to-1 ratio. This is a very good day for the Ukrainians. Again, it goes back to what the general staff is indicating from yesterday's activities. From here, though, I have to say there's a couple of bad losses for the Ukrainians. In fact, the rest of the losses are fairly, usual. But an ANTPQ-36 radar and a P-18 radar. P-18, that's expensive kit. That is, the Ukrainians are going to lose some capability by losing that equipment, and that will be a real sore loss for the Ukrainians. But other than that, just the massive Russian losses is incredible, and a lot of these also are destroyed. So that P-18 radar being damaged might give you some hope, but a lot of the Russian equipment there is destroyed. Marked difference. So surveillance and comm, 2 bits of that. Their own radar, Zupark 1 system. So that's a high value Russian radar system taken out. Hit by Gimlers, damaged. It's unknown as to whether these things are reparable or not. Artillery is pretty normal kind of stuff there. Interesting that a bunch of D30s, we'll talk about them in a second. They are older artillery pieces. Then a few tanks. T-72s, T-80, a lot of infantry fighting vehicles, including a lot of BTR-82As, some BMP-3s and 2s, no BMP-1s there. So just to remind you, we went through a period, or the Russians went through a long period of having an awful lot of BMP-1s, the older 50, 60-year-old infantry fighting vehicles getting taken out. Then that dipped, and some analysts, so Richard Vereka from War Spotting, saying that actually his speculation was that those older vehicles, they were getting them out of refurbishment, buffing them up, sending the front line. But at some point, it got to the stage, so he says, that to get BMP-1s out again, they've exhausted the half-decent ones. Now they need to pretty much rebuild the BMP-1s. So if you get to a stage where you need to rebuild the BMP-1s and you've got BMP-2s and 3s, which are much more recent vehicles, and you need to rebuild them, and that takes about the same amount of effort, you're going to rebuild the BMP-2s and 3s. So then we went through a period of there were no BMP-1s, and BMP-2s and 3s were on the loss lists on a regular basis. And then we saw a patch recently where a lot of BMP-1s started reappearing. So it could have been that then they were having to rebuild fundamentally those BMP-1s. And now we get into a period where there are no BMP-1s again, or far fewer, and we're starting to see BTR-82As, which I believe would be much more recent vehicles than the BMP-2. And so are we getting to a stage where the Russians are cycling through their much newer equipment? Are we getting to a point where they're utilizing newly produced vehicles? What can they newly produce? There's a lot of talk about what they are doing is not so much building new stuff as refurbishing old stuff and repairing stuff from the front line. So there's a lot of that going on. Could some of these BMP-1s that you've just seen recently be repaired ones that have gone back, been fixed up, and been brought back to the front line and been exhausted? How long can the Russians keep doing this? And this, especially, if you look at these general stuff statistics, you're thinking they are losing just phenomenal amounts of, say, artillery here, but APVs as well, just huge numbers. Okay, so there was a challenge yesterday. Oh, I don't want to listen to me. There was a challenge yesterday from someone saying, I don't believe these numbers anymore. If that many artillery had been destroyed, the war would be going the other way and Russia would be losing. Okay, there could be a genuine question there. Like, a lot of us think that. Like, how can they keep sustaining that? Are these really realistic, or this is a trollish person that's kind of couching it in a way like, yeah, the Ukrainian general staff figures are a load of nonsense. But first of all, I've spent an awful lot of time trying to justify them with visually confirmed losses that do go an awful long way to supporting what the general staff are saying. So that's the first thing. And then it's worth stating that the Lithuanian intelligence today, so this has come out today, have said that Russia can fight Ukraine at a similar intensity for at least 2 years. So 2 more years of Russians doing what they're doing. So what is going on there? Well, the report says that high oil prices support the and support from their allies, so North Korea, etc., enable Russia to sustain its war in Ukraine for 2 more years, while Russia also received materiel from Iran, North Korea, and microchips from China. So that's one thing, so that they can potentially produce equipment that means that they can lose it and replace it. But really, it's all about long-term stocks. Just look at this, right? So this is the towed artillery in Omsk, right? This is May 2021, cycling through eventually to May 2023, when there is nothing left. So how can they sustain doing that? Well, they bring things out of long-term storage. Satellite images show that Russian towed artillery storage in Omsk is now completely depleted. Can they keep doing that? Well, it's worth referring to Covert Cabal. Covert Cabal is a really good YouTube channel that goes through quite often immense amount of satellite data and imagery, and then literally counts each individual piece up to say, well, the Russians started with this amount and now they've got this amount. And we're going to go to a point in the video where they discuss this. And I think, first of all, the Russians just have phenomenal amounts of towed artillery and self-propelled guns sitting in huge storage units all around Russia. I mean, these are just thousands upon thousands of bits of kit from all around Russia that this guy has counted up. I don't believe the Russians can lose this amount of kit on a daily basis, says this chap. Well, I beg to differ, because the evidence suggests that they can easily do that because they have an absolute ton of this stuff. Anyway, it gets to a point where he concludes.
So other than those bases, there are about 6 other bases that we looked at, but they're all very small and not worth spending time on. So the grand total, pre-war, self-propelled, there were 4,450 and towed 14,631. And now, from recent satellite imagery, it's down to 2,961 self-propelled and 6,786 towed artillery that...
Wow. They went from 14,600 and something down to 6,000 and something towed artillery. They've lost 8,000, or they've taken from storage 8,000 bits of kit. So when you say, oh, I don't believe the general staff figures, how can they lose 40 pieces of artillery system, 40 pieces of artillery on a daily basis for like a week? It's like, well, they've cycled through 8,000 odd from their long-term storage. Then you've got what they're using anyway, and what they're building new, and what they're repairing, etc., etc. You put all this together, and the Russians are able to do this. I mean, it's a thankless task for the Ukrainians, because they destroy 40 in a day, and then the next day they've got to destroy another 40, and they've got to keep going until this stockpile gets down to a point where what they are cannibalizing is no longer useful for them. These are non-refurbishable pieces of kit, or they've taken all the necessary components, and he talks about this in this video.
Russia has remaining. And then finally, here's the breakdown of each type at each base. Again, unfortunately, some of the imagery.
So, with all the caveats that he applies to this, it seems that they've gone from 14,631 towed artillery to 6,786, and then 4,450 SPG self-propelled guns, howitzers, to 2,961. And of course, the question is, what condition are those ones in? Are they able to keep doing this any further? So, the question is, when is that tipping point going to be where they are struggling to be able to replace what they lose? And can they rely on building new units? Almost certainly not. But the rebuttal to this is, I believe the general staff figures, at least somewhat. There'll be a lot of damaged ones there that get taken away, repaired, and come back, and there'll be some incorrect claims and mistakes or whatnot, but it's not in the Ukrainian general staff's best interest to lie. The Russians it's in their best interest to lie, because they are talking to their domestic audiences. If the Ukrainians keep making these claims and then they are found out to be utterly false, then we won't believe them, then allies won't believe them, and then the allies will say, well, look, if you're just going to lie to us, we're not going to provide you with aid anymore. So I don't think it's in the Ukrainians' best interest to lie as overtly as the Russians do. The Russians have claimed to have shot down more aircraft, double the amount of fixed-wing aircraft the Ukrainians started the war with. So it's just nonsense. So we don't cry wolf. We don't believe the Russians, but the Ukrainians, I do at least somewhat believe their general claims. Okay, now moving on here. We're going to talk about the ship, the Sergei Kotov, being shot down, or being sunk, as a result of the Magura V5 drones. This is a video that Fighter Bombers released, not of the Sergei Kotov, but of the one from last month, the Cesar Kunikov, on February the 14th. Out of 10 drones, 6 hit the ship, which made it sink. So it did sink, but this footage has now come off from it, and you can see them absolutely hammering away at these drones. Now, these drones, the way they're doing this is with heavy machine guns or small arms fire. This is not ideal. What Trentelenko did a bit of analysis saying, my goodness, these guys need automated thermal optics, autonomous almost, machine gun units, kind of like the Skynex ones you see that Rheinmetall have produced. People are just wanging lead into the air here in a desperate hope that they take out the drones. Well, they don't, and it sinks. You need a Skynex bit of kit that can track this stuff no matter what time of day it is, shoot at it, and then actually also shoot almost vertically downwards as well for those drones that are very close to the hull. Now, Artur Rehi says the sinking of the ship Sergei Kotov is actually more significant than it seems. This is a third attempt by naval drones to attack the ship. The previous two were unsuccessful. This was a newest ship launched in 2021, commissioned in July 2022. It was designed specifically to combat maritime drones, but any new equipment produced by Russia never meets the stated criteria, and during its construction more budget was stolen than invested. It's proved its effectiveness in battle by turning into a submarine. There are the voices of Russians on the internet that it is time to withdraw the Black Sea Fleet from the Black Sea. Again, this talks to the idea of the value of shooting down, the value of sinking the ship yesterday, the Sergei Kotov, was $65 million to replace. Okay, but the value is actually in the capability of that ship to do X, Y, and Z, right? And it can't do that. The Russians can't do that now in this particular place. So that value is a functional value, but it's also in the value of the change of behavior to Russian sea fleet. We'll talk about this in a second. We've seen this with the the VKS. When they get their airframe shot down, then they stop flying for like 4 hours a day or whatever, and it changes their behavior, which has huge amounts of value for the Ukrainian forces on the ground. Anyway, Ukraine is most likely clearing a way for itself to attack the Crimean Bridge because it's a bridge that these ships are guarding. Russia has nothing to fight against sea drones, which can cause more damage to the bridge than missiles because they carry a larger charge. So they're carrying up to almost 900 kilograms of explosives. Imagine wanging 10 naval drones into the pillars of the Kerch Bridge, or maybe into just one pillar. Bang, bang, bang. If they can do that, then you don't need Taurus missiles. And I wonder whether this is really the aim of the Ukrainians with their naval drones. And there was a really good video from Ukraine, the latest, reporting from Ukraine this morning, talking about how the sinking of the Sergei Kotov wasn't just, let's send a bunch of drones. That we can see that ship's out of port. Let's send a bunch of drones and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll hit it. These things take a long time to gather intelligence for, and it take a lot of preparation. So they apparently did drone strikes on the western side of Crimea that kind of draws across air defenses. Then they take out the eastern side of Crimea, overwhelm that with 38 drones the Russians claim they shot down. So that then draws, exhausts air defenses and gets you to concentrate up into the air. To the north and west of Crimea, east of Crimea, sorry. Meanwhile, the ships are afraid in Feodosia. They've already been flushed out, some of them from Sevastopol. They're in Feodosia. They then come out of Feodosia afraid of getting hit by the swarm of drones. And then the naval drones come along and go, thank you very much. Now you're out in the sea. We're going to hit you. Bish, bash, bosh. And so these things take a lot of thought and preparation. So the Russians have not entered. This is the value I was talking to you about. Russians have not entered the Black Sea for the third day in a row. Ukrainian naval spokesman Platenchuk has said. They analyse the situation, deal with it. Most likely one of the fleet commanders answers uncomfortable questions. Therefore, it is now possible to speak of a calm in the Black Sea. Incredibly successful for the Ukrainians to do this, to sink the ship and to force the Russians' hand and cause them to go and sit in port in relative safety in Novorossiysk. Right. There's been talk about the claims of the Ukrainians in terms of shooting down, I don't know, however many, 11 fighter bombers or fighters in 15 days. And then you got the Il-76 and then the Il-22 was it, and the A-50s. Shot down as well, and so on and so forth. It's been a bad few weeks for the Russians. But then certain people, Andrew Perpetua included, saying, well, we've only got visual confirmation of maybe 5 of these, and the rest, I think, it's not true. So the Ukrainians the general staff are not telling the truth. And I was talking yesterday about, I don't agree with that analysis. I actually think it's not in the best interest for them to lie. But also, you're just not going to find visual confirmation of downed Russian jets very easily. We've had plenty of examples where jets have been found like 6 months, a year later, after we know that they were claimed to have been shot down, and then suddenly a bit of imagery comes out of a jet in a field that hasn't found its way to social media. So we've got form for that happening. We also can't expect people to be filming stuff like 100 kilometers back from the front line, as in drones. Military drones aren't going to be around there. So these things are going to be shot down. Someone may catch it on a mobile phone, but actually you're in trouble for releasing that footage. We'll come to that in a second. The Russians clamping down on that. So I think we can be justified in thinking that at least most of those Russian jets were probably shot down. So here is a further bit of circumstantial evidence to throw into this. PS01 actually referring to someone else's work, counting of Su-34s that probably did not return to bases between February the 17th and March the 2nd. Quote, we all know that within 15 days the air defense forces of Ukraine shot down 11 Russian Su-34 fighters. We know that they were claimed to have shot them down in the east and southeast of the so-called territory of Ukraine. The fact that only 2 planes were shot down was visually proven. That's obvious because the planes were shot down in the very rear of the Russian occupiers. I'm not really sure about the translation there, but the idea is that very few of these, Andrew Perpetua is talking about actually having 5 decent bits of evidence, well, evidence to suggest that 5 was shot down. And although there is no particular evidence, the results are visible. The sky over Ukraine is practically clear, especially in the east, and the number of aerial bombs dropped has halved. Okay, so I've talked about that being evidence that they've been shot down. So the VKS, apparently, they had 4 hours of not a single plane in the air in any of the occupied territories of Ukraine. That's the first time since the beginning of the war. Now, why would Russia do that? What's the best explanation of the data? Well, that the Ukrainians have shot down some planes, right? And so this keeps happening. They go, a lack of planes, a lack of aviation in the sky, lack of aerial bombardment of places like Avdiivka, but then it comes back. Actually, it's a snapshot here of this guy saying it's halved and practically clear in the east, because actually what happens is a day or so later, the Russians then go, oh, okay, let's go for it. Let's hope that the air defense has moved. But there's other evidence as well, and this comes from satellite evidence. So this is looking at some satellite imagery. There are a set of pictures on a GIF from Primorsko Akhtarsk Airport saying at least one Su-34 did not return to its base. In general, the Su-34 should not have been at the airfield in general, but at the beginning of the at the beginning of the war, it wouldn't have been seen there. But 4 units were still relocated there. One of them was probably shot down over Mariupol. So the English is a bit funky, but basically 4 have been relocated there. They wouldn't normally be there, but they are there. And one seems to have disappeared from the satellite imagery. Second set of pictures, Krimsk Airport, probably 4 Su-34s did not return to their base. The situation is identical to first. Before the Su-34s, they were not based there, but very recently they've appeared there, and then they magically disappeared. And then third set of pictures, Morozovsk Airport, presumably, 1 Su-34 did not return to its base. There should be about 20 Su-34s in total at the airfield, but most of them are not visible in the pictures, so these pictures should be treated with some skepticism. And then the fourth set of pictures from Kanska Airport, 8 Su-34s were redeployed closer to the front. We probably had to delay the drying process, so the kind of the analysis process, due to the devastation of the airfields listed above. We will be able to deny or confirm this in the near future. In general, 6 Su-34s out of the 11 declared did not return to their bases, and in addition, another 8 Su-34s were relocated to new bases to replenish losses somehow. So we could be talking between 6 and more there from that evidence. So again, it's looking at all of this and saying, well, at least most of those claimed appear to have been shot down. Now, just a bit of evidence to throw into, losses and how things are going. This is from More Translated. Reports of another major enemy assault repelled at Robotyne with 10 vehicles destroyed. I'll probably see the footage of that soon. I've seen, as I said, lots of footage. This is coming from Ukrainian sources talking about an insult for the Russians. So the Russians made another attempt to assault Robotyne with 3 assault groups at once from different directions. This time they came with a cover of equipment, armored personnel carriers, BMP-2s, and were tightly shelling and artillery with artillery and tanks. Considering that something went wrong with the 70th Infantry Regiment, someone burned down their base. This time they were used less, and instead they involved paratroopers and a 291st Infantry Regiment. All attempts were unsuccessful. The number of damaged and destroyed equipment is up to 10 units. At Dormash in Berdyansk, the Russians set up a repair base. So since the start of this successful assault, quote, scare quote, successful assault on Robotyne a month ago, it is said that there are more and more vehicles being repaired there. The Russians are being driven forward because the goal is to kick us out of Robotyne before Putin's elections. Considering this fact, I think attempts at movements will continue, but the outcome will be the same. Glory to the Ukrainian army. So the idea that they are, coming across quite a bit of trouble. I'm going to pause that there. Right. Oh, that should be paused. It was paused. Why was that not paused? Okay. Right. Why am I showing you this? I could show you stuff getting blown up. 10 a penny they are. And if you want to go and search that stuff, go for it, whatever. Just remember, these people are human beings. It's a terrible, wasteful loss of life, this whole war. But the point of referencing this, and you can click on it in a link below, is that this is a vehicle that offers no protection. So mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles are designed to stop this happening. This is a UAZ 469 that's full of Russian soldiers, goes over a mine, and those people fly 20 foot into the air in a burning, and fall to the ground in a burning mess. It is pretty horrific, and it just goes to show that equipment means an awful lot. And hopefully the Ukrainians we keep hearing the stories of how the Bradleys are so the survivability in the Bradleys is fantastic, and this and that piece of equipment they're being given MRAPs from this country, MRAPs in that country, that they are hopefully using the equipment that allows them to survive better. We do see the equipment getting damaged and inoperational, but it's about the people inside. Do they survive? I've seen BMPs that I can't believe survive. Some of the older BMP 1s and 2s go over mines and people get out and run off, and you're like, how did that happen? That explosion was massive. But I've also seen a lot of vehicles where they are being absolutely taken apart and they are not surviving, clearly. And the question is, who is using vehicles more consistently that aid the survival of the troops? Are Ukrainians using vehicles more? Well, actually, the Ukrainians aren't using vehicles all that much because they're on the defensive at the moment, and this is why we see footage like that. Anyway, just thought that would be an interesting nugget. And here's another interesting nugget. Okay, tonight near Klishchivka, that's south of Bakhmut, Ukrainians shot up a Russian APC with dummies in uniforms of Russian soldiers sitting on it. So soldiers of the Code 9.2 group who hit the APC with a drone assumed that Russians have such poor morale that instead of infantry, uniformed dummies had to sit on the armoured vehicle. Quote, in my opinion, because of the poor morale, the command requires infantry to drive, and there is no infantry that wants to drive due to the fact that their asses have been getting kicked here for several days in a row, and they planted dummies for the command to make it look like the infantry is driving, our defenders think. I mean, I feel sorry for the driver. Like, okay, but essentially this is like a dummy vehicle that I'm having to drive near the front lines, and then I don't know what happens because these dummies aren't getting off the top, or literally can't move off the top unless they're blown off the top. So I don't know. He draws a short straw there. Nonetheless, this appears to. I mean, it's visually recorded. This is something that's happened, and possibly talks to the losses the Russians are incurring and the effect on morale it has. Now, in Berdyansk, the organizer of Putin's pseudo-elections, Svetlana Samoylenko, was assassinated in a car bomb. Deputy mayor for economy and agriculture sector and finance was taken out there. So the partisans are still active. I don't know if this is partisan or sabotage or just careless smoker, but the Tuva thermal power plant that blew up, or part of it blew up yesterday. I reported on that. That's caught on CCTV now. Series of accidents in Russian-controlled territory is continuing. The explosion of the thermal power plant in Tuva, currently Russia, is being recorded from security cameras. So far, 18 people have been reported to be wounded there. What else do we have? So this is Patriots, a patriotic group, Atesh. These are partisans, again, causing a railway relay cabinet in the Moscow region, I believe. Golovkovo railway station has been set on fire. So again, agents successfully carried out sabotage, destroying a relay cabinet. That is the kind of thing that Ukrainians will want. And they'll want this as well, which is, I don't know if it's Russian on fire or a strike or sabotage, but a military school in Kazan in Russia is burning. Smoke can be seen pouring from the higher tank command school on the Orenburg highway. And Baza reports, the Russian media outlet reports, that the barracks are on fire. Okay, moving to to distant strikes and whatnot. The biggest piece of news yesterday was that 5 were killed in Odessa with a big missile strike, and it was actually 300 feet, 500 meters, different claims about how close it was to hitting Zelensky and the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis. So if you know or remember, Odessa has a lot of Greek heritage. In fact, Ukraine's history is intertwined with Greek history, and there are times when it's part of the Greek Empire and so on and so forth. So it's no surprise that the Greek Prime Minister came to Odessa to meet with Zelensky, but a missile hit very close to them. 5 people had died, and as the Greek Prime Minister said, we had explosions very close to us. Now, the claim is from the Ukrainians that it wasn't as a result of a direct targeting of those people, but it has prompted some strong condemnation. Ursula von der Leyen here and others. Quite incredible. Okay, so moving on, we have Nikopol, which is just to the north of Zaporizhia, or what was the Zaporizhia Reservoir. There has been a big old fire at a supermarket there. I don't know if this is a result of drones or shelling. It gets shelled an awful lot. Nikopol and Mahanets both get too much attention from Russian artillery. It could be missiles, I don't know, but that supermarket unfortunately has burned pretty much to the ground there. And talking of strikes, this is a guided glide bomb hitting Krasnohorivka, a big old explosion. This is how Russians do the war. They are replacing artillery with these guided glide bombs more and more frequently. To be fair, if Russia had had air superiority from the beginning of the war, they would have dropped inordinate amounts of dumb munitions all over the place, right? But they haven't had that, and as a result, artillery has been what they've used to flatten places before they then move the troops in, because the planes can't get close enough to drop dumb munitions. They did it right at the beginning of the war. They were dropping a lot of dumb munitions, but then they got a lot of planes shot down. So they pulled the VKS back and said, right, because 90% of their infantry is dumb munitions, 10% guided munitions, whereas the US would have 90% guided munitions and 10% dumb munitions, because they spend an awful lot more money in FNR&D on precision guided munitions, so you don't get collateral damage, you get much more accuracy with regard to hitting your targets. Although it will cost you more, you get more bang for your buck. Russians just flatten stuff and hope you get the actual target in doing so. It's just the way they do things. Now, with artillery, the munitions aren't that big, relatively speaking. So you look at someone like Vuhledar that has those big high-rise buildings that you can sight out of. You can use ATGMs to hit the Russians in Pavlivka down below on the lower ground, and that was happening for an awful long time. Then the Russians, so for a year or whatever it was, the Russians were hammering that with artillery, but all it would do is like break the windows, damage a bit of the facade, maybe cause fires inside, but structurally the buildings remain sound. Then they start hitting those buildings with these carb bombs. It started at 250 kilogram, 500 kilogram, 1,500 kilogram bombs. They freaking blow up buildings. Now you look at some of those buildings of Vuhledar and they are completely, rubblized by the use of these bombs. These bombs are massively important for the Russians, and that's why it's super important that the Ukrainians continue to degrade the Russian VKS, their air force, so they can't commit to hammering the front with those munitions. Munitions are also these glide bombs are also used on areas along the northern border. We know that the Ukrainian forces have brought back some of their border. In fact, I went to the Sumy border and was within drone range and artillery range and mortar range of the Russians while I was there. And I met a unit in a house, and they are now using glide bombs in that area and all along the borderline, and the Russians have had to, the Ukrainians have had to pull back their forces. This is another example in Kharkiv's Vovchansk, where they have damaged at least 12 homes, killing a 40-year-old woman and a 67-year-old woman there. So that is devastating for the residents who try and continue to live there. It just goes to show how prevalent those aviation bombs are. Then the Russians have been hit in Kursk as well as other places, in Bryansk, these oblasts north of the Ukrainian border, with drones. You've got to remember the Ukrainians, you might not hear about it so much because here we can see that two more successful Ukrainian attacks on the Russian fuel and oil depots. This is from yesterday's, or 2 nights ago's attacks. One in Kursk, one in Voronezh. The local population has been asked not to film the result of the attacks. So there are these regulations put in place from both sides that Ukrainians and Russians can't film and release footage of infrastructure, of burning, of strikes taking place. It does get out, but actually I think there's going to be an awful lot more. If the Ukrainians are to be believed that they are producing Shahed equivalent drones to the same degree that the Russians are, then the Ukrainians are going to be releasing an awful lot of these drones into Russian airspace every night, into Crimea, into the occupied territories, and there will be an awful lot of stuff that we don't know about that is happening. So anyway, that's my tuppence. Right, a few odds and sods here. So this is to do with the Ukrainians building fortifications along the northern border. So this is a Russian source saying, according to information from the border of the Kursk region, the Ukrainian armed forces have begun to copy the defensive Surovikin line on their territory. The work is being carried out at the distance of about 5 kilometers from the border, and they're working very quickly. During the construction of a support tower, up to 3 large tractors are often used with the rapid delivery of building materials and equipment by heavy trucks. Concrete fences, like our tetrahedron, so the dragon's teeth, but without large, sharp corners, which, similar to our line, are connected by cables, are also quickly delivered. In this regard, an order is urgently needed to destroy all construction equipment involved in the construction of fortifications, and of course, it is necessary to ensure the execution of the order with shells and drones. Well, actually, it could be that what we just saw in Kharkiv could be the sort of strikes on fortifications. So where is it? There. So using glide bombs to hit either fortifications or where the Ukrainians are housing their excavators or whatever. I don't know. It could be that that's what's being targeted. This will save the lives of our soldiers, says this Russian, and facilitate the advancement of our troops in the future if it becomes necessary to open new sectors of the front. By the way, it may very well be that construction is being carried out not to accommodate the armed forces of Ukraine, but to accommodate foreign contingent. Well, maybe, but probably not. So the reality of what I think is going on is, and some people could say, why are you spending so much effort building fortifications on the northern border when you should be doing it down in Avdiivka? I think both is happening. I think it's very wise to build the most substantial fortifications you can everywhere, and that includes the northern borders. And the reason is that you want this to act as a deterrent for the Russians. So, yep, we know the Russians aren't going to attack across the northern border in any significant way because they don't have the troop accumulation or the equipment accumulation. And if they do start building up there, you're going to know about it from satellite imagery and from drones and whatnot. So what you need to do is build up a deterrent that means that you can man those border areas with a skeleton crew. And it also will stop deep reconnaissance groups coming in because you'll have minefields and you'll have trenches and you'll have surveillance. You won't have too many troops, and then that means you can pull all those troops down to the front line to do like the proper fighting, if you like, and that will be enabled by substantial fortifications. And then, if you do detect the Russians building up, then you bring forces back to there and man the substantial fortifications that you have built. I think this is incredibly important. On the other hand, the Wall Street Journal has just come out today with an article saying there's slow progress on Ukraine's fortifications. This got a Russian saying they're building them really bloody quickly, and the Wall Street Journal saying they're building really bloody slowly. Slow progress on Ukraine's fortifications ahead of expected Russian offensive. Kyiv Independent says Ukrainian troops are building fortifications in expectation of a Russian offensive in the spring, though some worry that the progress is not fast enough, according to the Wall Street, relying on Western officials and Ukrainian soldiers. Take your pick. Right, this is just a random bit of footage. This is someone saying that they've got humanitarian aid from Moscow. And what is humanitarian aid? It is out-of-date hand sanitizer. Every single box there that you can see is out-of-date hand sanitizer. It just gets these boxes and just shows you. It's like, what do we need this for? And he goes and said, this is what's coming from Moscow. And then goes around the corner and says, look, this is the humanitarian stuff we're getting from Saratov. So I don't know whether this unit is from Saratov, which is kind of where is an area of Russia. It's where the Engels Air Base is. But they're giving us pasta and sugar and food. Yeah, this is a humanitarian aid we need. But this, what we get from Moscow, just endless boxes of out-of-date sanitary, not that it particularly goes out of date, but hand sanitizer. What is going on? Right, so Zelensky says those who are very tired of the war in Ukraine should come here to Odessa, to the Spaso-Preobrazhensky Sobor destroyed by Russian missile and pray that there is no war in their countries. So the idea, there's just been a big explosion by him and the Greek Prime Minister, and he says, you're tired of the war in your country, you should try coming here and experiencing this. And hope that this doesn't happen in your country. We're fighting a war, so you don't have to. The Institute for the Study of War, delays in Western aid will postpone Ukrainian efforts to regain the initiative as Ukraine prepares counteroffensive actions in 2024. And these are reports yesterday that Ukraine are getting ready for a counteroffensive. I can't believe that they'd be in the right place to do that. Anyway, the continued delays in Western security assistance could postpone the efforts to regain a theatre-wide initiative against Russia, according to the ISW. At the same time, Michael Weiss, here referring to another article, this is call sign Shaman, a Ukrainian troop who was deployed to Avdiivka, saying that the reason they lost Avdiivka, it was the lack of ammunition, no question. I would add to that the use of those guided glide bombs. You put those two together and you've got a hellish mix. But the lack of ammunition is definitely what stopped the Ukrainians from being able to halt the Russian forces in their tracks. And the final just anecdote, it is an anecdote, but actually it talks about this being a systematic problem. Right, and this comes from a channel admin, a Russian Telegram channel admin, who said, yesterday I had an impulse to write about unteachable degenerates. And the degenerates he's talking about are the Russians who are lying up the chain of command, who managed to report to the top about the capture of a position that turned out to be untaken. So it wasn't captured. And then they had to start zealously sending people there so as not to look pale in front of their superiors. So, we've captured this place. Okay, can you do this? This is, you want to see something? Oh, that means I'm going to have to actually go and capture it now. Right, quick, guys, go and get it, go and get it. And what that means is, because they can't call in all these other units like artillery and TOS-1 thermobaric launchers because you're supposed to have it already, and that will admit that you haven't got it. You just keep sending in your troops, and then that means that the troops just get sent to their death. So, and the other day, they killed a detachment of assault troopers, among whom were my acquaintances. There was no artillery preparation. The promised Solintsep Yok, that's the thermobaric launcher, did not arrive. And in fact, I saw one get blown up on footage today. So, but there was an order for the assault. People were caught in a fire bag. They were surrounded on both sides with mortars and then covered with cluster munition and then finished off with birds, with drones. Many were immediately killed, plus they couldn't pull out the heavily wounded. In other words, several things going on here. Lying to superiors, claiming you've taken places when you haven't, then having to take that back, but without the cover of Russian artillery and thermobaric support. So there's no preparation, there's no combined arms, you're just throwing humans in. And then the Ukrainians having mortars, artillery, and drones to just do what they need to do. So interesting situation there. In general, I had such an impulse, and then I decided that it would turn out to be too emotional. And as you can see, I didn't write anything yesterday. And today, I thought the people involved would be no longer be surprised by such crap since a long time ago, because such situations are not excesses. What he means by that is this isn't just an over-the-top situation that's happened just this once, but systematic practices. So I decided to sketch something on the tank theme instead. So I'll sketch. I don't know what he means by that or what the translation means, but this is the idea that these are systematic problems that Russians are having. So as bad as the Ukrainians are having it, the Russians, I think, are losing inordinate amounts of stuff and are struggling, but they just have inordinate amounts of stuff to draw from to keep that going, and the Lithuanians are now saying they can keep that going for 2 years. We shall see. I don't know whether the Lithuanians take into account these kind of analyses in their reports. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. That was 3 minutes quicker than it was when I recorded it earlier. My voice is hurting. I need a cup of tea. Goodness me. Take care.